Today I'm going to talk about the off-label use of medications like Ozempic, semaglutide, and Mounjaro, terzepatide for the treatment of food addiction, conditions like binge eating disorder and bulimia. Now I want to preface what I'm going to say today by emphasizing that these are anecdotal reports. To date, there have been no published, randomized, placebo-controlled research trials that show whether these medications are safe and efficacious in the treatment of these disorders. And so there's no FDA approval for this. And certainly what I'm saying today is not prescriptive. The information that I give in these videos is not meant to substitute as medical advice. There's no way that I can give medical advice to anybody who might be watching this video unless you were my patient and I performed an adequate, comprehensive evaluation. So these are not treatment recommendations. But these medications are very famous these days. They're all in the news, not because they're very effective at treating type 2 diabetes, which is why they were developed and what they're FDA approved for, but because they also lead to reliable and rather dramatic weight loss. And so, of course, they're very popular medications, and there's a whole celebrity culture, people with means, a doctor that's willing to prescribe it to them, and the ability to afford it because they're extremely expensive. And if it's a non-FDA approved indication, then insurance is not going to pay for it, and we're talking about thousands of dollars, over $1,000 a month. So you have to be affluent and you have to have a prescriber. There are plenty of people who are taking it for weight loss, and it works. And so what I'm going to talk about today is the justification for using medications in this class, not for weight loss per se, but to help control an actual disease state, which is that disease state of being addicted to food, because these compounds do help. And it's my hope personally that the research studies will be forthcoming and that in the not too distant future we will have FDA approval for these medications because they work. And the goal certainly is to be healthier and to lose excess weight, but I'm talking about the use of these medications to help a patient stop obsessing about food and to have a relationship with food that's healthier. These medications have varied effects on glucose metabolism. And in addition to making a person more sensitive to insulin, there are also other mechanisms of action that impact gastric emptying time and appetite itself, the satiety center. They act as hormones that lead to a diminished appetite. And that's why they're very popular for individuals who are trying to lose weight. Very recently, Ozempic was approved by the FDA to treat obesity with one other comorbidity. And so usually patients with a BMI over 30 who are obese are going to have some related comorbidity, whether that's elevated triglycerides or dyslipidemia or hypertension or diabetes. But now you don't have to have diabetes to actually get FDA approval, which means that if you have insurance, the insurance will pay. But in speaking about off-label use of this medication, taking medication to help you lose weight is certainly nothing new. There have been numerous medications that have been tried in the past, some FDA approved, some not, but they've all been problematic. And so most famously, the stimulants, amphetamines, have been used to curb appetite. The problem with amphetamines is, in addition to the fact that they elevate blood pressure and pulse and can cause hypertension and can increase your risk of dying from a heart attack or a stroke, in addition to the fact that they cause irritability and insomnia, they can precipitate mania. Stimulants are obviously medications that are highly controlled for a reason because they have a lot of potential adverse effects. In addition to all of the potential adverse effects, a person develops tolerance to that anorexia over time. And so there might be some initial weight loss, but once that effect has waned, a person tends to gain back the weight that they lost. And so they're not good medications for weight loss. Other medications that have been used include stimulant-like medications, medications with stimulant properties, such as phentermine. But again, you run into the same problems. Phentermine, I think, causes more irritability than Adderall. Phentermine, and especially a combination of medications, there was a combination of fen that was actually removed from the market because it was causing cardiac toxicity. Topamax is an anticonvulsant that has also been looked at for weight loss because it was noted that in individuals who took it, there was unintentional weight loss noted. But the problem with Topamax is that it has modest effects at best, and it has cognitive side effects. So there's cognitive dulling that we see in patients taking Topamax, just sort of very mild day-to-day cognitive deficits. To date, there have not been any good medications that you could take that will help you lose weight safely and effectively. Enter semaglutide, Ozempic. And again, this medication is used to treat diabetes, but because it has such profound effects on the brain and the satiety center and the drive to eat, it really does work in a fundamental way. The stomach is going to be a lot slower to empty, and once a person starts to eat, the feedback that they get, and this involves hormones, that feedback stops the drive to eat. And even in a person who's morbidly obese, even in a person who has food addiction, what I've experienced myself is that food obsession disappears. And the ability to control one's eating, and then thereby hopefully to make healthier dietary choices. A lot of times it's hard to make healthy choices when you're addicted to food, you're obsessing about food, and you're eating all the time, and you're eating for the wrong reasons, and you're eating when you're not hungry, and you're eating food that is highly processed and that's addictive. Once we can break that cycle with a medication that helps a person get some control over their eating behavior, then hopefully with therapy and non-pharmacologic techniques, an individual can make better choices and can develop a healthier relationship to food. The effect is a gradual one. Because the medication can cause nausea, it needs to be titrated. And so typically a person will not see any weight loss for a couple of weeks, but by the end of that first month, most people report approximately 5 pounds of weight loss. And then as the dose is titrated and as a person continues to take this medication months 2 and 3, we really see a dropping off of eating excess calories. It is a prescription-only medication because it can cause pancreatitis, which can be fatal, as well as thyroid cancer. So it shouldn't be taken by people who are of normal weight, who just want to lose those extra 5 or 10 pounds. But I do believe that it can be very helpful and justified in a person who may not be obese because they may have bulimia, they may be compensating, and so they may not be obese technically. But I think if the medication gives them some freedom from this addiction, that it can be justified as long as we're monitoring them for these uncommon but potentially serious side effects. By affecting the satiety center, the brain thinks it has what it needs after a small meal or in between meals when a person would ordinarily be tempted to snack. Because of the effect of this medication, that urgency, that drive to abuse the substance, which in this case is food, is simply not there, or it's greatly attenuated. And so over time, it gives a person a reprieve. It's like a rehabilitation period. The idea would not necessarily be to take this medication forever. That certainly would increase your chances of developing thyroid cancer or some other chronic condition that we may as yet be unaware of because the medication has not been out on the market for that long. But it can perhaps help the person reset, and perhaps, this is speculative, but perhaps after many months or even a year or two of being in control with regard to eating habits and not obsessing about food and eating in a more healthy way and having a healthier relationship with food, a person could continue that because they have some momentum, they've broken some some habits and habit loops that were keeping them from getting control of their eating behavior and losing some weight. It's really not even about losing weight. That is the ultimate goal if it leads to better health, but that's a consequence of not being enslaved by food and abusing food, which can cause all of these health problems, from diabetes to colon cancer. I had a brother who recently passed away from colon cancer. He was addicted to food. He was morbidly obese. He had type 2 diabetes and hypertension and dyslipidemia and all the things that go along with being addicted to food. And had he been able to get adequate treatment for this addiction, he might still be with us today. And so food addiction is a life-threatening illness. It may take decades to claim your life, but in the meantime, it certainly leads to a decreased quality of life. The other possibility would be pulse therapy, not taking the medication continuously, maybe taking it for a few months to get a hold on this addiction, to lose some weight, improve health, and then come off of the medication to test a person's newfound habits and their newfound determination to eat in a more healthy way and in a more controlled way, and to see if the sort of resiliency of that, and if they need to go back on the medication after a few weeks or a month or two, if their addiction comes back with a vengeance, or their appetite just comes roaring back and they find that they're obsessing about food again and they can't control their eating behavior, then they could go back on the medication, and there could be a series of treatments along with psychotherapy, along with perhaps cognitive behavioral therapy, to cement those better habits and to distance oneself from those unhealthy behaviors. Mounjaro and Ozempic also seem to have psychotropic effects. I have heard reports of lethargy, of decreased energy, decreased drive. There have been a few reports of decreased libido, of anhedonia in general. People not going to the gym as often, not working out as often, not having the drive to get things done. And so we certainly wouldn't want to curb a person's otherwise healthy ambitions, but I have seen that as a corollary. And again, what I'm telling you today basically amounts to case reports. I've seen just a few persons, and I've had experience myself with this medication. I'm also speaking from personal experience. If I had just seen a patient or two or had read about this, I wouldn't be making this video today. But I experienced myself, and after decades of struggling with binge eating disorder, of engaging in very unhealthy compensatory mechanisms, which did damage my health, I shared that addiction with my brother, and I've struggled with it my whole life. And I was complaining about this to my primary care physician, who offered me samples. I didn't even know that semaglutide came in a non-injectable form. It's called Rybelsus, and it's the same medication. It just comes in a pill form. It's a little bit harder to take because it's very unstable and it tastes terrible, and you have to take it on an empty stomach, and it's a little bit more involved. But he offered me those samples, and my BMI was not greater than 30. I was not obese. I was heavy for my height, but that medication changed my entire relationship with food. And it was absolutely mind-blowing. I remain amazed to this day just how much this behavior, which I'd always considered largely voluntary, is not voluntary. That simply changing my brain chemistry in the hypothalamus, where you have the satiety center, the drive to eat is controlled, and turning that on and turning that off. The long and the short of it is, right now, it's just not available to people with food addiction and eating disorders. it's not FDA approved, the insurance isn't going to pay for it, and it's prohibitively expensive. You can get it over the counter in Mexico, it's still hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And I wouldn't recommend it without a prescription regardless. You really should be under the care of a physician, but physicians are not going to do it until it's approved. I myself would absolutely treat a patient of mine off-label as long as they understood the risks and benefits and the fact that this was off-label, meaning it's not FDA approved and that we don't have the research to back the fact that this is effective. But so long as my patient had the means to afford this medication and met diagnostic criteria for somebody whose life is really in turmoil because of food, whose quality of life is decreased because of food, and whose physical and mental and emotional health and spiritual health is imperiled by this addiction, I would absolutely treat them off-label based on my own personal experience. And I hope very much that in the near future, we get those studies. I was very happy to see Ozempic being approved for weight loss. And I think the requirement that a person have a BMI over 30 and that they be obese plus one consequence of obesity, I think that that's a good safeguard. It does have some potentially serious side effects. But I would like to see the BMI criterion removed so long as the person was diagnosed with an addiction. Addiction to food is really no different than addiction to cocaine. The reward of eating is ultimately mediated by dopamine. That's the final common pathway in those areas of the brain that are rewarded by eating behavior. And the addiction pathways are the same. A person is out of control. And once they start eating certain foods, they're out of control. Just like the alcoholic who takes that first drink. Now, that having been said, not all foods are equal. Not all foods are addictive. Broccoli is not addictive in the way that French fries are. And it's no coincidence that food that is better for you, that is healthy, is in that category of you eat what you need to eat an appropriate amount. It fills you up with fiber and nutrients, and you're going to live longer, and you're going to be healthier, and you're not going to die of cancer, and you're not going to die of cardiovascular disease and diabetes and these other conditions that are directly related to substances that we're putting into our body. In this case, foodstuffs, as opposed to heroin. Physicians are reluctant in general to prescribe off-label because it does increase our medical legal risk. And if things go wrong, then the chances of being sued are greater. And so a lot of physicians are shy about that. But at the end of the day, ethically, whether you're on-label or off-label, it's your job as a physician to make sure that the patient understands the risks and benefits of any sort of pharmacologic treatment, and for the physician to obtain informed consent from that patient. So it really doesn't matter whether the FDA has approved it or not if those duties are fulfilled. And psychiatrists are very used to prescribing off-label. The medications are no more dangerous using them in syndromes for which there is not official FDA approval. They may not be as efficacious, but come to find out, in most cases they are, which is why we're using them. And so in psychiatry, there's a lot more off-label prescribing. Whatever else, we need medications. This is an area of psychiatry in which there are disease states that are very, very debilitating when it comes to quality of life issues, and pharmacologic treatment is sorely lacking.